I still remember the exact sound. Not my mother's voice. Not the rain pounding against my windshield. The sound I can't forget was the metallic click of a banker's pen sliding across polished oak as he quietly said, "I'm sorry, Ms. Carter, according to these records, your trust account has been closed for nearly 6 years." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it had to be a mistake. My father had spent 20 years building that money for me. $3.6 million. Gone. And according to the paperwork sitting in front of me, my own mother had signed every authorization. At that moment, I had no idea that 18 months later I'd be standing across the street from her house watching 2 FBI agents walk up her driveway with a search warrant. But to understand why they came, you have to understand how I lost my family long before I lost the money. My name is Emily Carter, and I grew up on the west side of Columbus, Ohio. If you had asked anyone in our neighborhood what kind of family we were, they'd have described us as ordinary. My dad, David, owned a mid-sized commercial construction company that specialized in restoring older buildings across central Ohio. My mom, Linda, stayed home when I was little before taking over the company's bookkeeping once I started high school. We weren't flashy. Dad drove the same pickup truck for nearly 15 years. Mom clipped coupons even though we could comfortably afford groceries. Dad always said real wealth wasn't about showing people what you had. It was about making sure your family never had to worry. That sentence stayed with me long after he was gone. When I was 14, Dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Within 11 months, he was gone. Watching someone disappear that quickly changes the way you measure time. Before he passed away, he insisted on putting everything in order. I wasn't allowed in the room when he met with attorneys, but afterward he hugged me tighter than ever before. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "I've taken care of your future." I believed him. And I believed my mother. She told me Dad had created a trust that would stay invested until I turned 30. She explained it would protect me from making reckless decisions while I was young. Honestly? That made sense. I never questioned it. I worked hard anyway. I earned scholarships. Graduated from Ohio State with a finance degree. Built a career as a financial analyst. Rented modest apartments. Drove used cars. Worked 60-hour weeks during earnings season. People assumed I came from money. The truth was, I lived as though I had none. Because I wanted to earn my own success before touching what Dad had left me. Whenever I asked about the trust, Mom smiled. "It's growing beautifully. The investments are doing great. Your father would be proud." Those conversations usually lasted less than 2 minutes. Then she'd change the subject. Back then, I thought she was protecting my focus. Now I realize she was protecting something else. Looking back, there were warning signs everywhere. She suddenly remodeled her kitchen. Then came a lake house near Cincinnati. A luxury SUV replaced the old family sedan. She blamed everything on good investments and the booming housing market. I never challenged her. She was my mother. And besides, she had always handled the finances after Dad died. Why would I suspect her? When my 30th birthday finally arrived, I wasn't dreaming about sports cars or expensive vacations. I wanted one thing. The truth. I scheduled an appointment with the bank that had managed Dad's estate for years. Mom sounded oddly nervous when I mentioned it. "You don't need to rush," she said. "We can talk next month. I've already made the appointment." Silence. Then she forced a laugh. "Well, let me know how it goes." For the first time in my life, my mother sounded afraid of good news. The meeting started normally. The relationship manager congratulated me on my birthday before typing my name into his computer. Then he frowned. Typed again. Excused himself. 10 minutes later he returned with another executive. Neither of them smiled. That was when they showed me copies of transfer authorizations. Dozens of them. Every document carried my mother's signature as trustee. Large withdrawals. Investment liquidations. Wire transfers. The final transaction had emptied the account entirely. 6 years earlier. I couldn't breathe. There has to be another account, I whispered. The banker slowly shook his head. This is the complete record. I stared at pages that made no sense. Every financial instinct I developed over the past decade screamed that something was wrong. If the trust had legally allowed those withdrawals, where had the money gone? And why had no one ever told me? The banker hesitated before speaking again. Ms. Carter, there is one thing that's been bothering us. I looked up. Several authorization forms appear, unusual. What do you mean? They're legally processed. He paused. But if these signatures weren't executed by the trustee personally? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. For the first time since my father died, a thought entered my mind that I hated myself for even considering. What if my mother hadn't simply spent the money? What if someone had helped her make it disappear? I walked out of the bank carrying a folder that suddenly weighed more than $3 million ever could. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel without turning the engine on. Then my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring. It stopped. Then rang again. And again. By the 7th call, I finally answered. Her first question wasn't, "How did the meeting go?" Instead, she asked one sentence that sent a chill down my spine. So, exactly what documents did they give you? I didn't answer her question. Instead, I asked one of my own. Mom, where's Dad's trust? The silence on the other end lasted so long I checked my screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, she sighed. It's complicated. No, I said. It's either there or it isn't. It was used. My stomach tightened. Used for what? For the family. I looked around the parking lot, trying to steady my breathing. The family? I repeated. I'm the beneficiary. You were young. I was 24 when the account was emptied. You wouldn't understand. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not because of the missing money. Because she still thought I was a child who could be distracted with vague answers. I want every statement. Every receipt. Every transfer. You don't trust your own mother? I don't trust someone who won't answer a simple question. She hung up. That evening, I drove to Jason Reed's office downtown. Jason and I had met during freshman year at Ohio State. While I built a career in finance, he'd become a corporate attorney specializing in fiduciary disputes. He listened without interrupting as I spread the bank records across his conference table. When he finished reading, he leaned back. Emily. What? Have you ever seen annual trust reports? No. Tax filings? No. Investment summaries? No. He folded his hands. That's a problem. He explained that trustees aren't allowed to treat trust assets like a personal checking account. They have legal duties, detailed record-keeping requirements, and an obligation to act solely in the beneficiary's best interest. If these withdrawals weren't authorized by the trust documents, he said quietly, this could go way beyond a family dispute. I felt sick. Jason looked me straight in the eye. Don't accuse anyone yet. Then what do I do? Document everything. Over the next 3 weeks, my life became a second full-time job. Every lunch break was spent requesting records. Every evening disappeared into spreadsheets. Every weekend was devoted to organizing timelines. The more I looked, the stranger everything became. Mom's expensive lake house had been purchased just 4 months after one of the trust's largest withdrawals. Her luxury SUV arrived less than 2 weeks after another transfer. She'd started making generous investments in businesses owned by two of her friends that quietly failed within a year. Money wasn't simply missing. It had scattered in every direction. Then Karen Alvarez entered the picture. Jason recommended her because she'd spent nearly 30 years tracing complex financial fraud. Karen wasn't dramatic. She wasn't emotional. She simply looked at numbers until they told a story. After 4 days with the records, she called me. "Emily. You found something." "I found several somethings." She slid a binder across her desk. Colored tabs filled almost every page. The transfers weren't random. She pointed to dates highlighted in yellow. "They're coordinated." "What does that mean?" "Every withdrawal was followed by another transaction within 48 hours. "To where?" Karen looked at me carefully. "Several LLCs. I've never heard of them." "I don't think you're supposed to." We searched state business records. The companies existed. Barely. Most had no employees. No websites. No real business activity. Yet hundreds of thousands of dollars had flowed through them. Then Karen uncovered something that made the room go completely quiet. One LLC listed its mailing address as my mother's accountant's office. Another had been registered by a business manager who handled finances for my mother's close friend. And one company had dissolved only 3 days after receiving nearly $600,000. It felt less like bad investing and more like someone trying to erase footprints. Jason immediately told me to stop contacting my mother. "If this becomes litigation," he warned, "every conversation matters." I hated that advice. She was still my mom. Some part of me wanted her to admit everything, apologize, and explain that there had been some impossible misunderstanding. Instead, she invited me to dinner. She cooked my favorite meal. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes. Homemade rolls. Exactly like she had every birthday growing up. For almost 20 minutes, she acted as though nothing had happened. Then she finally smiled. "We don't need lawyers involved." "Then explain the money." "I invested it." "Where?" "For us." "There is no us. Dad created that trust for me." Her smile disappeared. "You think money makes you entitled?" "I think theft does." Her hand slammed onto the table. "I sacrificed everything after your father died." "I know you sacrificed. I deserved some security too." "You deserved your share of the estate." "I built that business beside him." "Then why hide everything?" She stood so quickly her chair crashed backward. "Because you'd never have understood." The room fell silent. Not because she'd answered my question. Because she hadn't denied taking the money. 2 days later, Jason filed a civil action demanding a full accounting of the trust. The next 6 months felt like living in slow motion. Federal investigators requested copies of every document Karen and I had assembled. They interviewed the bank's compliance staff, subpoenaed records from multiple financial institutions, and quietly expanded their review beyond my father's trust. I wasn't given updates. I wasn't supposed to be. But every few weeks Jason would receive another request for records, another clarification, another timeline. Each request told me one thing. The investigation wasn't ending. It was growing. Then, one gray Thursday morning, my phone buzzed. It wasn't Jason. It was my next-door neighbor from my mother's subdivision. "Emily. I thought you should know." "What happened?" "There are federal agents at your mom's house." I grabbed my keys before I even realized I was moving. By the time I reached her neighborhood, 2 dark SUVs were parked in the driveway. Several agents were carrying evidence boxes through the front door. Neighbors stood quietly at the ends of their driveways pretending to water plants or walk their dogs while watching everything unfold. I stayed across the street. I wasn't there to celebrate. I wasn't there to gloat. I simply needed to see that reality had finally caught up with years of deception. One agent carried out desktop computers. Another removed stacks of financial binders. A third photographed documents before sealing them into evidence bags. Then I saw my mother. For the first time in my life, she looked genuinely frightened. Not angry. Not defensive. Frightened. Our eyes met for only a second. She looked away first. Months later, investigators explained why the case had become federal. The missing trust money had been only one piece of a much larger financial scheme. Several shell companies had allegedly been used to disguise the movement of funds through multiple accounts. During that process, investigators discovered forged financial records, altered trustee documents, and false business filings connected to the same network. The trust had helped expose the pattern. It hadn't created it. I wasn't asked to prove criminal intent. I simply had to tell the truth. Every bank statement. Every email. Every conversation I had documented. Every timeline Karen had built. The facts spoke louder than any family argument ever could. The civil case concluded before the criminal proceedings. The court ordered a complete accounting of the trust. Assets purchased with trust funds, including the lake house and several investment accounts, were traced and placed under court supervision while ownership was determined. I didn't suddenly recover $3.6 million overnight. Real life doesn't work that way. Some money had been spent years earlier. Some assets had lost value. Some would never be recovered. But a substantial portion was returned through asset liquidation, insurance recoveries, and negotiated settlements. For the first time since my father died, I felt like his promise hadn't been completely erased. The criminal investigation took longer. When it finally ended, the evidence showed years of financial misconduct that reached far beyond my inheritance. Several people faced charges related to financial fraud, document falsification, and conspiracy arising from the broader scheme. My mother accepted responsibility for her role as part of the legal process. Hearing that didn't bring me joy. It brought relief. For years I'd questioned my own memory. Wondered whether I was overreacting. Wondered whether I was betraying my family simply by asking honest questions. The truth removed that burden. People often ask whether I've forgiven her. The answer isn't simple. Forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness isn't reopening doors that someone repeatedly chose to close. I visited her once after everything was over. Neither of us talked about money. She quietly said, "Your father would be disappointed in me." I nodded. Yes. There wasn't anything else to say. Some apologies arrived too late to repair what was broken. I sold the lake house after the court released it. Not because I needed the money. Because I couldn't build new memories in a place purchased with betrayal. Part of the recovered funds allowed me to establish a scholarship in my father's name for first-generation college students pursuing construction management and engineering. It felt like something he would have loved. Instead of becoming another symbol of greed, part of his life's work became an opportunity for young people chasing honest careers. That mattered more than any luxury purchase ever could. Today, I still work as a financial analyst. Only now I spend part of my free time teaching financial literacy workshops at local community colleges. Whenever someone asks why documentation matters, why fiduciary responsibility matters, why asking uncomfortable questions matters, I smile. Because I know exactly how expensive blind trust can become. If sharing my story helps even one family recognize warning signs before it's too late, then some good came from the worst chapter of my life. My father once told me that real wealth wasn't measured by the size of a bank account. It was measured by the integrity you protected when nobody was watching. For years I thought I'd lost everything he left me. In the end, I realized the most valuable inheritance wasn't the money. It was the courage to fight for the truth, even when the person standing in your way was the one who taught you how to say mom. If you've ever had to choose between protecting a lie and protecting the truth, tell us your story in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories of family betrayal, justice, and redemption.